Okay, good evening. Thanks for coming along. Thanks. Nice to see so many people here. We've just got back from New Ireland, looking at green spiders and all sorts of other spiders. And I could tell you things, but I know nothing about spiders. So I'll hand you over to Alastair Lavery, who's down from the UK. Is an expert in Falkland spiders. I can tell you all that.
Yes, thank you. Well, I finished this afternoon. So one of the rules of any PowerPoint you ever do is as soon as it goes on the screen with an audience, you see the most disgusting spelling mistakes. We'll see. Okay, that was a good start. Okay, spiders of the Falkland Islands. There are 47 species live in the Falklands. A high proportion of them don't live anywhere else in the world. And what I'm going to try and do is to convince you that they're nice, useful things and that they should be looked after. They're not easy to see. A lot of them are very, very small, and an awful lot of people don't really like spiders. Now, I've been studying spiders in the Falklands for the last 20-something years, and nothing in the Falklands frightens me. But if a really big spider comes up behind me and I see it suddenly, there's a natural human reaction to jump away. What you have to do is to override that by knowing that there's nothing is going to do you any harm on the island. So you can just put up with them. So let's see if we can get the first. That's the one. It's. You'll be worn out. Right, start with a slight digression. The Falkland Islands' earliest recorded spider, I only discovered about 18 months ago. When Falklands Conservation got in touch and said that they wanted something done with green spider, I started to look into the more detail on the green spider. Now, I knew that it had been first recorded in the Falklands in 1910 it was, and I'll come back to that in a moment or two. But there was a little reference I found in a paper about it that said there had been an American expedition of ornithologists, bird watchers in the Falklands in 1912. And they had deposited specimens of the green spider in the Harvard Museum of Comparative Zoology. Now, one of the wonders of today is that everything is online. So I was able to go to the Harvard Museum's catalogue, find the details of the spiders that had been found by that expedition. And I was able to use them in some of the analysis I was doing. But much to my surprise, the line above it was the only other spider that was in their collection from the Falkland Islands. And this was the labelling. It's a spider from 1848, and it's a spider called Heterophyta venetrosa. Now, I'm going to apologise at the beginning about scientific names. Most spiders don't have common names. Only 3 of the spiders of the Falkland Islands have got common names, and I've given 2 of them their common names. The other one was the only one that I know was named locally, and that was the green spider. But anyway, this was the label, and oh, holy cow. There. And that is Heterophyta. It is 2.5 centimetres body length. Its leg span is about 10, and it is an enormous thing. The little picture at the top is I'm getting a big shadow in that picture. I think it's that window. Is the specimen in Harvard, and that's a live specimen of the spider. It's the most unlikely thing to find on the Falkland Islands. So I had to do a bit of looking into it.
You just
Right, what are you doing?
You swipe it, don't you?
I double tap. You see? There. Okay? So, we will try on to. So, in 1848, The spider is native to tropical Asia. It was actually described by Linnaeus himself in 1767. By 1875, it had spread right across the Pacific on the tropical and subtropical islands and had arrived in tropical Chile. It's now found in all the Pacific Islands and even in buildings in Europe, but in temperate areas it's only ever in buildings. So let's have a look at minor triumph time. What was happening in the islands in 1848? It had become a crown colony in 1840. Richard Moody was the first governor. Now that was an interesting link, because the spider had been deposited by a visiting naturalist. And actually Moody has got a bit of a reputation for being very welcoming to visiting naturalists. And in fact, in a bit of research that Liz here and I were doing on a saxifrage that grows in the hills near our house in Scotland, we discovered that one of the specimens had been discovered by Hooker, famous botanist from that time, and that he had been on the James Clark Ross expedition, and he and Moody continued a correspondence for the rest of their lives. So it could have been that he had visited Moody, that something had happened about that. The administration had only moved to Stanley 3 years before the visit, and the total population of the islands was 145. So the chances of there being buildings big enough, well heated enough, and well established enough to have a population of this giant spider running around inside them is nil. So, a bit. Is it replaced?
Process of elimination.
Well, it was lovely talking to you. Oh, no. There, right. And we are on.
Any ideas there?
Is it linked to the mouse at all?
Does somebody think? When I said spelling mistakes were a nightmare.
It's all right.
Oh, look at them. We have a mouse.
If you want,
Okay, if I take the mouse over there.
Yeah, or you can go left and right.
Yeah,
Left
excellent. That,
So if you want to go to the next slide, I press Y.
yeah, we will stop tapping. Okay, so, and I'll get lots of exercise. And I'll have to put my specs on to see left and right. There we go. Now, the gentleman who deposited the spider in Harvard was Charles Frederick Winslow. He was an American, and there's a little biography of him coming up. He graduated from Harvard in 1834 in medicine, so that was the link back to the university where the spider went. In 1844 to 1847, he was running the Seamen's Hospital in Lahaina in Hawaii. And he left Hawaii in November 1847 on a whaler called the Atlantic, skippered by William Beck and then by Thomas Wilcox. In that single sentence is a little bit of a tragedy. William Beck was one of the first whaling captains from Nantucket, where Winslow came from, to take his wife whaling. The voyages were 3 years, and he took his wife Hannah. When they were off the Kamchatka Peninsula, Beck died, and 3 or 4 weeks later his wife died, and Beck, who was the mate, took over command of the ship. And we don't know any of the details of exactly what happened, but that's the sort of tragic story. By 1848, Winslow's back practicing medicine in Nantucket, and he then went on to a distinguished career as an author of scientific books of the time and ended up as the American consulate in Valparaiso. So he was quite captured. We know exactly when he left Hawaii, because he left Hawaii under a cloud, which is quite difficult to work out what was going on, because he was accused of profiteering from his medicine, but he was working on an island away from the main medical centres and had rubbed up against the medical establishment in Hawaii, perhaps because he wasn't a missionary. So we're not entirely sure why he left. If you read the Hawaiian account, he was a horror. If you read his family's account, he was a hero who was picked on. So nothing in the world has changed. Anyway, what does that mean? It means that I haven't. It means that actually reading the label very carefully, it says taken by Dr. C.F. Winslow at Falkland Islands, 1848. That is just about right for his voyage between Hawaii and Nantucket for him to be sailing past the Falkland Islands. The Spider had almost certainly got onto the ship in Hawaii or one of the other tropical islands that they visited and had been found by the crew and taken to him, so it was at Falkland Islands. So I'm afraid the first Spider of the Falklands was not there at all. But we're going to have to change scale to look at some of the other Falkland spiders. So I'm going to do a real Falkland Island spider now. These two images are to scale. So that's the size of Heteropida compared to the next little spider I'm going to talk about. It's not, I'll get back to which spiders were found next. This is just one that I've been doing quite a lot with recently. It's called Stictonanus liphonia. It's only found in the Falkland Islands, and it's characterized by these tiny little holes all over its carapace at the front end. Only two groups of spiders in the world have got that. One of them is only found in the northern hemisphere, and Stictonanus is found in the southern hemisphere. And it's been attracting quite a lot of interest recently, the whole genus, because it's been getting work on there. Okay, anyway, back to Stictonanus. That's where it's been found so far. Now, all of these distribution maps I'm going to be showing you are based on published records, that is, things that I've been able to find in the literature or observations that I've made while I've been here. I named this one and I called it Liphonia because that's where I found it. It was on Liphonia down here, where most of these dots are. And it lives in acid grassland, neutral grassland, and in bogs. That's this little habitat diagram here. So it's a nice little animal, and this is the distribution of its relations. There are only 5 species in the genus, and I got involved with a guy in Washington who was working on Juan Fernandez Islands, and he found 3 species very, very similar to little Liphonia there, and we knew about other species that were down the Andes and then out in the Falklands. World distribution. Very unusual distribution, going from subtropical down a mountain range and then out to here. But we were able to, I don't expect you to read that, we were able, because we had DNA samples from some of them, we were able to classify an entire bunch of spiders around them to see what its close relations were. This is called a cladogram, and this shows up here that the Stictonanus species, including Liphonia, are in this little group here, which the other authors of the paper called the Conosur clade, the southern cone clade. And I'll do a little bit more detail on that. Stictonanus itself is really important because it's found only in the Falkland Islands. It's only so far been found in one island, and it's part of a small group of related species only found in the extreme south of South America, the Cono Sur. This is the group that's found in that little group. And another name at the bottom there is going to crop up later in this talk. You'll never guess where Falkland comes from. That's another group of spiders that are only found in the Falkland Islands. The other two, Patagonita, is only found in Patagonia, and Notholeptophantes is only found in Terra del Fuego. So this little group of spiders who are genetically separated from all other South American spiders. And the people I was working with in Washington and Madrid think that that this is a group of original South American spiders that were probably widespread before the Panama Isthmus closed. And just like the mammals coming down and pushing the native mammals from South America further and further south, they think the same probably happened with spiders. And so we are looking at a residual population of the original inhabitants of the southern continent. Not all Falkland Island spiders have got that background though. Falklands. I don't do favourites, but I'm going to do 3 or 4 just to show that I quite like this lot. Again, these are quite big. Some of these are up to 4 millimetres long. They're pretty chunky things. Tend to live in tussock, and they're little money spiders. So they spin this kind of web. I'll come back to the webs in a moment or two. But I'll come back to the webs now. I've forgotten to move the slide. They spin a hammock web, which is a sheet of non-sticky silk, usually far down in the vegetation. But Falklands can go quite high. And they hide underneath the web, and they wait for something to fall onto the web. If it's too big, they stay where they are. If it's just the right size, they crawl across the web until they're underneath the animal that's lying there, wondering what's happened to it, and bite it through the web. So they never come into contact with the animal until they've paralysed it with their neurotoxins. They're quite smart little things. So this is the distribution of the 4 known species of Falklands. One of them, Hadassah, is found right across east and west, and also on Weddell and Keppel Island. Isonum is only found so far on the Jasons. Striatus is only found on Beauchene Island, and we'll come back to him. And Weddell, until yesterday, was only known from Weddell Island, until I was going through some of the samples we collected in New Island, and there it was. So there should be an additional dot there for Weddell. So that's almost made it worth coming, suffering the air bridge last week. So that's the distribution of Falklands. So there'll be a little thing here. Why is it important? Again, genus found only in Falkland. Now, finding a whole genus of animals in one archipelago, it's sort of like the Galapagos almost. It's really lovely stuff. Again, it's related to the connoisseur clade, and I'll come back to Falklands spinosa later. I have just in the last 2 or 3 days come up with a new hypothesis about Spinosa. We'll get to there. So, if the huge Heteropida wasn't the first spider in the Falklands, what was? Well, Rupert Valentine, who I think will be known to some, well, not in person, but well-known Falkland Islander, husband of Eleanor Valentine, who did the beautiful flower paintings that are still around, collected some spiders and sent them to Hogg in 1913. He was a New Zealander working in London. So even in those days, our ethnology was a lovely international study with people across the world cooperating. He decided that all the spiders he'd found were endemic to the Falklands, and he named 2 of the species after Valentine as Valentina. Unfortunately, those names haven't survived, and I'm going to do a little bit on the annoying but necessary changes that happen to animals' names. These are the ones he found. Negayan paduana. I nearly was going to say I'm not going to mention it again. It's not my favourite spider. It's quite a confusing spider. It's very common and it looks very like another one. And for those who were with me in New Ireland, all of the stuff where I was saying, oh look, there's another wolf spider, 90% of them were Negayana, so it's actually gone down my list even further. It's a very confusing spider. Tetragnathus laboriosa we will deal with in a wee while. Enenema oculatum we're going to get to. Petricus tolgreni, I'm going to show you a picture of later, and Haversia defensa isn't a spider, it's actually a harvestman, so we'll get to that at the very end. And he found Molinarania magellanica, which is the current scientific name of the green spider. But green spiders are very confusing, so poor old Hogg thought he had two species of spider, because he had two completely different colours, and he thought they were different. So he described it as two different species. We now know it's only one, and there it is. That's the Falkland Islands green spider. Most of the spiders I've seen look like that one, or another photograph that I'll show you in a moment or two. But if you really want to be sure that a green spider is a green spider and not something different or new or wonderful, you've got to look at the underside, and that pattern of black and white lines is what taxonomists call diagnostic. That's what defines the species. That's why we know that's what it is. In all of its different colour varieties, it's always got that pattern. They're more difficult to see in males in the Falkland Islands, and we'll get to that in a moment or two. But that's the green spider, and that's how you spot them. And it's been an orb web. Now I thought we'd put this up just in case. Orb web is the classic spider web, the web that Charlotte spins in the book, and it's a series of radiating lines and then spirals, usually two spirals of silk. Though you can't really see it in that picture, which is not a Falkland Islands picture, it's a Scottish one. The spider goes round, lays the outer bits first, then lays down the radii, and then goes round and lays maybe 25% of these as quite heavy silk. And that's a structural spiral. And then it goes back round again and fills in the spaces with sticky silk. And that's the actual bit that does the catching. And some orb web spiders sit in the middle of the web and make themselves very obvious, and the green spider is one of them. And we'll come on again to another spider that doesn't do that. So that's the orb web. Immensely variable species. And this is from a Rangers to Chile poster, because it's common right up to halfway up Chile. And this is the variation in pattern that it can have. So far we haven't found any of the spotty ones on the Falklands, but they may be here and they may be completely overlooked because of course they look nothing like green spiders when they're in that form. So that's that, and this is the date maps. Before 1950, very few records because very few people were looking at spiders, but it was first found at Goose Green and then at, what island is that? Is that Carcass out there? Yes, thank you. I should know these things. Between 1951 and 2000, there were more records coming in, and it had more of a wide distribution. It was collected most in Stanley at that time, in that period, and pretty well scattered, including appearing in New Ireland for the first time there. At this point, there were quite a lot of people collecting spiders. There was an Argentinian guy who, when I was first here, some people could remember him, and I can't remember his name now, but anyway, he had collected spiders, and that was published in a paper called Los Araños dos Malvinos. Their records are there. They got it all across the island, including Stanley. The Ian Strange did sampling in Stanley and other islands, and his records on there, and an officer from MPA called Kirk.
Kirk.
Not Captain Kirk.
Charles.
Charles Kirk collected quite extensively across the islands, and all of his material went into the Natural History Museum unidentified. And when I was roaming in London, when I was rummaging around there one day, I found all his bios there, so I was able to identify them. And he had a lot of green spiders from Stanley at that point. That was 1982, I think. No, it couldn't have been 82.
No, he
wrong
was here 85, 86.
Right.
Because he was in Stanley and then Mount Pleasant. He was one of the first to move up
That
there.
was when they were there.
Yeah.
Because he had records from Mount Pleasant as well.
Yeah.
So, but I think it was actually Mount Pleasant rather than Mount Pleasant Complex at that time. So anyway, it was a it was a common spider. Living disaster. Right up until 2001, when it ceases to be found on the west. The one dot on the west there is Port San Carlos, and you don't get much less west than Port San Carlos. Sorry, east. So that's it, but it's becoming found all over the East Island with heavier dots on, which means more species, on West Point and on New Island in the extreme west. So that's the historic pattern. This is where it's been found. Some of them found in native things, but the two big peaks there are Gore Scrub and Gardens. A minor peak there in coastal habitats. So, but it's it's what 60–70% in gardens and in gorse. So that's a sort of background to what we're the start of the work that we're over here to use now. What's the colour range in the Falkland Islands? We don't know, but we can come on to that. What's the distribution pattern, if there is one, to the colour marks that are in the Falklands? Where did the green spider spin its webs before there was gorse and gardens on the Falkland Islands? And we've still to crack that one, but I'm beginning to get some ideas, but they are so shaky I'm not going to share them. And what are the factors that are controlling its distribution changes over that historic period we've done? It looks as though it may have done the being in Stanley and then not being Stanley in the early part of the 20th century as well, because we've got quite competent observers not finding it in Stanley before its peak in the 1980s. So, what's going on? And I don't know yet, but I've got another 3 weeks to try and find out. So, just some pictures of the green spider to help you find it. About 50% of the webs have got this hackled silk down the web. Can sometimes go across as well. It's called a stabilimentum, and quite a few spiders in this group spin that. And one of the lovely things is that nobody knows why. There are a few theories around about why some of the orb spiders produce stabilimenta, but nobody is really sure. And this picture up here, that is a male. It's smaller and it's browner than the female. And that one is actually taking its life in its hands because it's approaching the male. We saw quite a lot of intimate behaviour on New Island, so we won't go into details about that at the moment. But you can just about make out the black and white striping pattern under his abdomen as well. There are only two other orb web spinning spiders in the Falkland Islands. I want to find out more about this guy, and I'll possibly need help with this from people in Stanley. This is the missing sector orb weaver, Zygiella exnatata, one of the few spiders where the common English name is just about as stupid as the Latin name. But it spins a web like this, but it's always got this missing sector. doesn't always have to be at the top, but there's always a missing sector. And that missing sector has got a single strand of silk running down to the hub. And the spider sits in a little retreat it builds for itself in the vegetation above the strand in the missing sector. And it waits for something to hit the web, runs down and catches it. The green spider sits in the middle when he and she are hunting. So that's the main difference between the two. Accidentally introduced into the Falklands in a container. We've actually got the root of the container into the base down at, name's gone. Anyway, you know where I am. And then some of them got into Stanley. It was fumigated, but some were released. We had a look at distribution with school kids in about 2018, and they were coming up with some of them, but since then we haven't, I haven't had any records of it. It may not have survived in Stanley. I hope to be able to find out in the next week or two. If any of you have seen that, tell me. It's such a distinctive web. And the other one is the silver long-jawed orb-web spider. Now, this is Tetragratha laboriosa. The most amazing thing about this spider is its world distribution. It lives in Falkland Islands, it lives in Patagonia, and then it comes back in North America and in Alaska. So it's right down, suitable habitats, mountain sides, right down the whole of America and out to the islands here. On the islands, this is the distribution, but all of the dots here, bar one, are pre-2000. It too had disappeared from the East Island. In November, Sally Ponsett put that dot on the map by finding a big population of them near Fitzroy. So it may never have gone, it may have been overlooked, or it may be back, we don't know, and I hope to find out a little bit more about it. It builds a web that is much looser, it's got bigger gaps between the spiral, and it's got a biggish gap in the middle of the web as well. But the spider itself has got this huge long abdomen. It's very, very distinctive and usually quite a silvery colour with huge jaws. So it's actually very distinctive. Changing names, I said, sounds as though somebody's been careless, they've got things wrong and its names had to be changed. So the example I'm going to use is Notolinga fujiana, because this one's name changes are, at least in part, my fault. So, it's a little spider with that kind of distribution. It's a very small one, might even be the smallest spider in Falklands, body length about 1.5 millimetres. And it lives in tussock, acid grassland, bogs and coastal grassland. So it's not something you're going to find wandering around the garden. Now when I first came across it, it was so different from anything I'd ever seen before that I knew it was a new genus. So when we first described it, we gave it a new genus named Linga, and the species name was Orchetta, because that was the area of Lafonia that I found the first specimens in. And after it was published and its name was established, we found out there was a bivalve mollusk called Linga. And you can't have two animal species with the same genus name, so we had to change it. Now that was a bit of a shame, because I had named it after my wife, because one of her middle names is Ling. But we just put Noto, which means southern in Greek, in front of it, so it's now Notolinga. That was the first change, that was bad enough. Then Nadine Duparet was a French ornithologist, was working in a museum in Germany, and she found this thing. And from that, and from the drawings of its genitalia, that is Notolinga orchetta. But it was found in 1893 in Patagonia and was given another name, Neriena fujiana. Now the Neriena is wrong because that's a northern hemisphere name. So my Notolinga genus survived, but I had to change the orchetta to fujiana. And So that all had to be published, and the spider is now called Notolinga fujiana. And that in its life has had all of those 5 names appearing in the literature. So that's why spider names get very, very difficult sometimes. And this is the worst case because, of course, its entire name has changed. Linga has gone from the original description and Orchetta has gone. So if somebody picks up that paper and says, oh, I found a Linga Orchetta, they're going to have to go to a major catalogue, which is fortunately online, and discover that its name's been changed 3 or 4 times. That has happened to almost every single spider in the Falkland Islands. They changed their name. Also said a little bit about colour variation. The green spider is very, very variable, but this little guy, who as you can see is widespread right across the Falklands, Selkirkia ventrosus, is also quite variable in colour. It spins a web like that, called a tangled web. You could maybe confuse it with the money spider web, the hammock web, but not with the orb web. And its distribution is, its colour ranges, most places it looks like that. In bushes, it tends to look like that. And the little red one at the end, you ever guess, well, I tend to find most of the red ones in Diddle-dee. So that's a really neat little piece of colour mock. All the same species, had me fooled for a while when I first started catching them. Right, so favourites now. What's the oddest looking spider in the Falkland Islands? Definitely this, a trap-jawed spider called Mechasmochius segmentatus. It's got enormous jaws. The enormous jaws have got teeth which no other spiders have. It's only got 6 eyes, which is really weird because spiders are supposed to have 8 eyes. But the thing I like about it most of all, very widely distributed, mainly in tussock, but the family that it's in was first described from fossils in amber from the Baltic, from the Cretaceous, 100 million years ago. At the beginning of the last century, it was discovered in Madagascar. In the 1930s, spiders that looked just like that were found in Tierra del Fuego, and it was then in the 1970s found in the Falklands. So it's a living fossil and it's living amongst you unnoticed just now. I find telling spiders apart in the field very difficult. I often make mistakes. People send me photographs, I quite confidently say it's such and such, and then have to send them another email later and say, I've thought about that again, probably wrong. This one, Sanogaster backhouseni, again, quite a widespread spider, doesn't seem to like West Falkland very much. It's got this it's always got that wonderful sort of MOD mark on its back. It's very, very distinctive, even when it's quite little. And the spider that you'll probably see most often running about is this one, Petricustal renai. It's a running crab spider, and it's very, very active in any open habitat around the Falklands. So that's one that you will all have seen running about somewhere. And I thought I'd put this one in. No excuse, except I really like it. It's one that I found myself. It lives almost exclusively in Tussock. It's right across the islands, and yet until 2004, I think, when I first came here, nobody had actually ever looked at it and said, oh, this is different from the other ones that look a little bit like it. So it's a South American genus, Sononovus, and Otariorum is a little bit clever, I think. Otariorum is Latin for from the sea lions, because I first found it on Sea Lion Island, and I quite like that. So, iconic spiders. I think that the spiders that people have talked to me most about in the Falklands are the ones that were on the stamps in 1984. 2 of them, the 1 pence and the 6 pence. Remember 1 pence and 6 pence, anyone? And those are 2 green spiders, and it's 2 different colour morphs of green spiders. And the one of the £1 coin, down here, it says the bush end spider, Enenema bushenicum. And I'm going to deal, we've already dealt with the green spider, I'm going to do a little bit on bushenicum. It's not called that anymore because it is actually simply a bigger, darker version of a spider that's found right across the islands called Enenoma oculatum, which is the one in the picture. The picture is actually very, very like bushenicum because it came from the top of Mount Osborne. The other big dark ones came from bush end. So in extreme habitats, they get bigger and they get darker. And so that unfortunately means that the iconic picture on the stamp isn't the bush end, isn't Enenema oculatum. But I think it is the bush end spider because I think the drawing that Ian Strange did is actually of Falkland Islands spinosa, which is only found in Bush End Island. The picture on the stamp doesn't look anything like an Enenoma. They're very big, chunky running spiders, and he's drawn a lovely, delicate little spider, and I'm pretty sure it was this thing. Now, this is the rarest spider in the Falkland Islands. It was found by a British Antarctic Survey expedition in the 1970s. And since then, no one has seen any of them. They collected 4 of them. I've been to look at the material in the Natural History Museum in London. It's very definitely different. The description is really good and it's definitely there, but it's not been seen since that date. We don't know whether it's there or whether it's the rarest spider in the Falklands or the most recently extinct one. So, end of my travel log with spiders. A little bit of advertising for spiders now. How do spiders help us? Well, there's not much been done on looking at what spiders actually do in the Falkland Islands. We're still not entirely sure we've found all the spiders that live here. But in North American temperate woodland, 57% of all insects are eaten by spiders. That figure was arrived at by radioactive tracer experiments, and it's very precise. When I catch spiders in Scotland, there's usually maybe twice as many insects in my sample as there are spiders in the sample. When I sample here, there are usually twice as many spiders in the sample as there are insects. So I think that figure is probably an underestimate of what spiders are doing to insects in the Falklands. I think they're eating more than 57% of them. And how many spiders do you have on the islands? Well, went through the data I've got, so this is a wee bit on the rough side, but when I look at figures, they work out reasonably convincingly, and that's spiders per square metre. So if you're going to Whitegrass, you could expect every square metre there'd be 3 spiders lurking in there. If you go into people's gardens, there's going to be about 10 spiders per square metre. If you go into Hebe and Gorse, 29 spiders, but coming out with just 1 spider more is tussock, which, as everybody knows, is an immensely important habitat. But 30 spiders per square metre is quite a lot. But it doesn't really compare with what is going on. These are figures from the south of England, where woodland, field and moorland have numbers of spiders per square metre like that. So, as you'd expect, they're down. And in fact, the Falklands figures are very close to the figures that I've been getting in Scotland. So, in upland Scotland, spider densities are about the same as they are in the Falklands. Just try and translate that in. That's just what 30 spiders look like in a square metre. So every time you look at something, obviously in tussock there's a lot of space falling up and down the column. Okay, and I try to work out using sort of average figures how many spiders there are in the Falkland Islands. And there are about 3,500 of you guys, And I think that's 120 billion, but I'm not very sure how you translate those into numbers. But there's a lot of spiders on the Falkland Islands. You're outnumbered. And what do they eat? Well, again, we don't have figures like these for the Falkland Islands, but these are figures from around the world. How many kilograms of insects a year do the spiders in that habitat eat? And it comes out at 60 kilograms in a field, 100 kilograms in woodland, and in a coffee plantation, 300 kilograms. Falklands are going to be in the sort of bottom end of this table. You're not going to compete with coffee plantations. I think this is about the end. Two things that are arachnids, but not spiders. And these are the two that occur in the Falklands. Haversia defensa is a harvestman. It's an absolutely stunning animal, quite slow moving, lives in quite a range of habitats, and it's like a tank. It's heavily armoured, it's got spikes everywhere, and it's a magnificent looking thing. The other one is a pseudoscorpion. I must emphasise that one, it's 3 millimetres long, and two, they don't have a stingy tail, so they are pseudoscorpions. And only one species has been confirmed from the island. It's fairly common, much not as common as spiders, and it's got a very, very lengthy name. So, how can you help? Well, could you let us know about any historical records of green spiders? A lot of this information will be residing in the community. I've already had people come up to me and say, "Oh, I remember when I was younger. You know, we used to see them in such and such a place." Now, I haven't got all those written down yet, and with dates, but any comments like that would be absolutely brilliant. If you want to go further than that, we prepared a guide to the 3 species of web-spinning spiders that are in the Falklands, and if you could help us collect new records by using that, and you could help us to find places to look for green spiders, either around Stanley or anywhere out in camp, so that we can direct our searches to places where people know that we're going to find some. And we have got a special contact number, which I hope I've got right, spiders@conservation.org.fk. Send anything to that, and I'll be able to pick that up, as will Glenn, and we'll try and respond to everything we get, provided we're anywhere near some internet content over the next few days. And I just put that up because I was very, very rude about Negaians, and so I thought I'd put a picture up just at the end. That's what they look like. And there are a lot of absolutely beautiful and fascinating spiders I haven't had time to mention. That's a spider called Plachnichia weddelin, and I've already been sent a picture of what is probably a new species of Plachnichia. There's 2 known ones, and a 3rd one may well be there. And I just thought I would leave you with a view and ask you if there are any questions.
Just to check, if we're lucky enough to see something unusual,
Sorry?
if we're lucky enough to be out and about and see something unusual, is that the right contact email?
Yeah, that's the best one.
Yeah.
Liz and I are going travelling. We're here for another 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We'll be out travelling a bit. We're going to Weddell and then around the west, and we are not going to be in internet contact all of that time. So if we don't get back to you, be patient, we will. But yeah, please keep in touch. Hi.
Okay, I've got a lot of family members here. One of the things that particularly my grandma says is that the green spiders were introduced, but they weren't native. Do you know if they were or not? Because it might be that they're on the decline from being invasive.
Right.
What's her theory?
Wow. He's looking at it.
I mean, I love a green spider.
No.
But like that was why she thought
When
they
I
were
was
everywhere.
wandering around
But the habitat.
New Island,
Yeah.
I was looking for, and we're going to continue doing this, looking for possible native habitats where they could have come from. if we can't find those, then we'll be with you, Granny.
Okay.
But I think that, well, the little scenario, the problem with the introduced thing is that its natural distribution is the southern half of South America. And very, very little has been introduced into the Falklands from there. Everything has come from Europe.
The gorse.
The gorse would have come from Europe as well. So I'm not dismissing that idea, but at the moment I think that for the new island situation, what I am thinking possibly happened was that you have an island that's got a lot of tussock, a lot of boxwood, and a lot of tall fir. Farming arrives, they burn, they introduce grazing animals, and round the settlement they begin to fence and back the fences up with gorse. Almost all the gorse that I've looked at out of town in Falklands runs along fence lines, and it's done very, very well there. So a possible scenario is that as the natural places where green spiders could live, possibly at quite low densities in tall fern and even lower densities in boxwood, disappeared because of agriculture, the hedges were there to save the green spider. But I want more information from you, Granny.
When you were saying about native habitat.
Sorry, you have.
Sorry, yeah. When you said about native habitat, we've definitely found them in Healy, Boxwood on Split Island, which hasn't had.
Oh, wow. Sorry, where was that?
You've got it on your 2025 map, the Split Island, just
Yep.
south of West Point, and Dunbar is in Tall Fern as well. So they've definitely.
Right.
So Dunbar's got loads of sheep, but
That would
Split
be-
Island hasn't had anything in those.
That would be worth investigating.
Yeah, we've seen
Keep
some
get in
pictures.
touch with me.
We've seen Dunbar, I think we've seen
Oh,
some
yeah,
pictures already, so you've
Are
probably.
you Marie Paul?
I'm the doctor, yeah.
Hi. The problem with emailing people is you've no idea what they look like. Yep,
But yeah, we definitely.
we'll stay in touch. That's really interesting.
You might have said, but when you said about the missing sector orb spider
Yeah.
and the one with the big jaw, how big are those guys?
About that?
Oh,
Big,
quite big, yeah.
slightly smaller than a green spider, but in the same sort of, oh look, there's a spider. Not, was that a dot moving on the floor? That quite a lot of them are. So yeah, you would notice it. And the webs are probably that across. Has anyone seen one in Stanley?
I was on the community board the other day,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah. I was a community board, someone's question.
Are they still around? It would be really, I think it's the opposite of the introduced green spiders. If this thing arrived, it seemed to spread very, very quickly, and people were finding it in houses and gardens all around Stanley. It would be really quite nice if it had just given up and died, because that's another potentially invasive species gone. So that's... Any? Hi.
Are you concerned about the change in the distribution of the green spider, or do you think they're fine, they're not endangered or anything, and the levels you see them?
Well, I think they're native, and I think that they're coming under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
One of the major things we did quite a lot of observational work on New Island, and I think it'll have to be confirmed elsewhere, but I think we've got a sort of kind of idea of what their lifestyle is. When I went to the gorse hedges that had probably on average, one green spider every metre of gorse hedge. They were clustered, so they weren't just spread like that. I only saw them like that 2 days. Of the 6 days we were there. The other days, 1 or 2 of them appeared if it was a nice day. If it was a windy day, less, and if it was a rainy day, nothing. The other striking thing was they weren't there at 8, they were there at 12:30, and by 5 o'clock they had all knocked off and crawled back down in the playground. So they could easily be in places and people aren't going to see them because they've got this very, very restricted time and weather window that they're out. Maybe one of the reasons they're seen more on New Island, because of course the rainfall there is exceptionally low, and it might be that they get seen more because there are less rainy days that drive them underground. The other way that I could look at it is that there were 2 cruise ship days while we were in New Island, and those exactly coincided with the 2 days when there were green spiders everywhere. So whether they've got some kind of contract with the cruise ship here, I don't know, but we'll have to try and work that out later.
Just tell me a little bit more about the collection process. It sounds like so many spiders are so small.
Yeah.
You were saying that you don't get lots of insects. Like, I'd just like to know something about that.
Right. It's pretty brutal. Most of the spiders are tiny, and they can't be identified alive. They've got to be put under a microscope and have their genitalia examined to be sure what species they are. So when I was sampling green spiders, no green spiders were harmed during my sampling there. But general sampling, I take a great big white thing called a beating tray, which is about that size, and it's white cotton stretched over a framework, and I either shake the bush or the tall fern or whatever over it. If I can't do that, say in tussock, then I take chunks of tussock out and shake them over the beating tray. And then I've got a thing called a putter, which is just a plastic tube with a bit of muslin in the middle of it. And I rush round the tray, suck the spiders up into the tube, and then this is the tragic bit, I then have to put them into a little vial of ethanol. And people say, is that cruel? And I say, well, I'm a Scot, I know several people who spent a vast amount of time and money on buying themselves that very death.
Could I just clarify as well? You said that the female is the green and the male is the brown.
So far, yes.
Okay.
Whether that is going to be when we get to other populations,
Yeah, and
I don't know.
that's an adult, isn't it? Because the
Yeah,
babies.
the babies are always tiny and brown. And a reasonably, I think by the time you could ever see it, they'll have that black and white stripy pattern underneath their abdomen, so they can be confirmed. But fortunately, in a Falkland Islands situation, there's nothing else spins or webs except Ziggyella, and if Ziggella's gone, we have no problems with that contaminating the data. It's going to be right anyway, you know, they're going to be green spiders. In the UK, we've got about 35 species of orb web spinning spider, so it's a far more difficult job deciding which one you've got. Here, if there's an orb web, and especially if it's got that thing called a stabilimentum, but 50% of the webs have a stabilimentum. If it's got a stabilimentum, it's a green spider. If it hasn't got one, it's almost certainly going to be a green spider. So again, when we were monitoring in New Island, we counted empty webs as well, because we're pretty sure that those were green spider webs.
Just to kind of just add to that, and so in terms of like the webs and seeing spiders, we want to start, as I was saying about what information in emails and stuff, I want to actually start a citizen science program. So when Alastair's gone, we can carry on getting records and so on. So can I ask, if you're interested in like looking for spiders, looking for spider webs and helping contribute to that, please can I ask before you go to put your name and email address on the piece of paper at the back, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a mailing list and I'll send everyone on that a guide to the spider webs of the orb web spiders, so you can see what to look for, and then it tells you what information to send in. So we need not just what sort of spider, but you know what kind of spider it was, where it was, the colour, if it's like green or brown, what vegetation it was on, that kind of information, because that kind of information will then help us to kind of keep on building up these maps and finding out where they're found, both where they are on the islands and what vegetation that they are on. Okay, so if I could ask everyone if you're interested in that to sign up, put your name and email address on that at the end, because the more people we've got doing this, the more records we're going to have and more information that we can answer some of these these questions. We do have, you were saying, Andrew, about the males brown and the females green. I was going through today, I've got about 800 photos of spiders front and back that we need to go through and check out some of those, so we'll check that out. And if you know anyone else is interested in helping out with this green spider thing, get them to email me. We will put it on Facebook with the email address to try and get more people signed up, but the more people we've got signed up to help with this, the better it's going to be.
Just a question before we, I mean, at this time of the evening, you see out in the camp, you see all these long strands of web.
Yeah.
So what is producing those?
All those are called drag lines, and almost all spiders, except almost all spiders that spin webs, and only about half of Falkland spiders spin any kind of a web. If you're going to spin webs, you don't want to live in a windy place. It's as simple as that. So this isn't a good place for orb or any other web spiders. They need shelter. But when they move around, they leave behind them a tiny, very thin silk strand, and especially when they're crossing vegetation. And that's so they can get back, or if they fall, they can swim. They can swing on their drag lines. And yeah, I got almost excited. I was walking up the hill past the community school today, and there I saw a drag line, and I thought, oh, first green spider in Stanley in how many years? But it wasn't. It was almost certainly one of the Selkirkiellas, the little comb-footed spiders. So that's what those are. But that probably means there's web-spinning spiders around.
This is second-hand, but there was a Canadian researcher here a while ago, and he found one during COVID in his garden when he was in
Where was that,
quarantine.
sorry?
He found a green spider in Stanley in his garden when he was in quarantine. But that was like 2020.
Yeah. He didn't succumb.
I'll ask him to
Ask
take a
him.
picture.
Yeah,
because he
that
did
would be
take
brilliant.
pictures.
Please do it, and then use the email address to get in touch with me.
If you want to stay and chat with others or ask any more questions, then please do. But otherwise, can I just a round of applause and say thank you, Alastair, for
Right. That's that, folks.